Hey there, you're listening to We're Just Talking About It. Thanks for joining us. Today on the show, we have a brand new guest for you. His name is Khalil. Khalil was born in Kabul, Afghanistan. Khalil shares his remarkable stories of what it was like the day the Taliban arrived in his city and how his walk to school would never be the same. Plus, he shares the amazing work he did as a physician alongside other organizations to help rebuild his city's medical infrastructure and systems after the Taliban destroyed everything. His stories are unforgettable. We hope you enjoy this eye-opening conversation with Khalil.
Yes, I was born and raised in Kabul city, Afghanistan. Actually, I spent much of my life there, and when I was relocated to the United States, it was 2008, and I was almost, it was my late 20s, and I was around 28 years old when I moved to the United States, actually migrated under the SIV program, a Special Immigration Visa Program. Yeah.
So, and we were there at the same time. I first went to Afghanistan in 2002 and 3 to help build the Afghan army, and it wasn't long after that you and a lot of your friends from the medical school were helping us to build the Afghan army in many different ways.
That is true. Actually, I worked with the Combined Security Transition Command Afghanistan. That was my first job that I secured after graduation from medical school. And I was hired as a physician liaison between the CSTK Command Surgeon's Office, Medical Planning and Operations, and Afghan Ministry of Public Health. And we were a team of 13 Afghan physicians, collaborating with a team of 72 Navy, Army, Air Force physicians, sort of working with the, both the Afghan National Army Office of Surgeon General and the Afghan National Police Office of the Surgeon General, and helping them rebuild their capabilities and their hospitals. And it was a fantastic experience working alongside those military physicians, and at the same time doing something great for my people. That was really rewarding. Yeah.
And what year did you start there? When did you graduate from med school?
I graduated 2002. Then I went for a residency program, ophthalmology residency program. In 2004, it was August 2004 that I actually started working with the CSTK Command Surgeon's Office. It was in Camp Eggers in Kabul, Afghanistan. Yeah, I believe you also were stationed there, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we had a headquarters at the U.S. Embassy, and then we also had a building at Camp Eggers, the ARC building, they nicknamed it, that large mobile structure that was built there at the beginning. So, and I worked really close with Dr. Najibullah Sahak back then, and
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, those were good times, and I think our listeners probably don't know how. 2002 and 3 and 4. You all were really doing some heavy lifting to rebuild a medical system that had been utterly devastated by the Civil War and the Taliban.
Well, that is true, and also we were all excited, and we were like full of energy that will never end. We just thought, we are doing something great to our people, to our nation, to our country, and everybody was really highly motivated, and we actually invested in our experience and medical knowledge and whatever we learned, combined with our cultural knowledge. And I think that a lot of people contributed tremendously over those years that I was there, and it was really a very collaborative environment, among all those parties. And I think that there were great achievements also. Those years were really great years. Yeah.
It was, and how critical that was back then. I remember before we started to build all the regional hospitals and rebuild the hospitals, all the injured and wounded had to come back to Kabul. I mean, every time we'd fly out to visit soldiers anywhere in the country, we were flying back with wounded soldiers on our aircraft, on our helicopters and airplanes to get them good treatment. So, I mean, it really was life-saving work to rebuild that regional level hospitals across the country.
That is true. I mean, by the time the Taliban were ousted, there was literally no infrastructure left in the country, throughout the country. And everybody were busy actually starting from scratch. And then that is true. I mean, the Afghan National Army was also in its embryonic phase back then.
Sure,
and they were,
yeah.
yeah. They were training, those Kandaks, as they call it, the battalions, that they call it Kandak. And some of these terminology is actually adopted by the U.S. advisors too, and they call them Kandaks.
Yep.
So these Kandaks were basically in their embryonic phase, and they had their own advisors, and it was just, rebuilding everything. All these efforts were put forth to rebuild all these capabilities, infrastructure, and whatever that can come to your mind, crosses your mind, and they were working on it. And there was not that medical system, that robust medical system that actually was necessary. Back then, it was after after 2001, the conflict was not really as big as it is now for the first couple of years.
Yeah.
So everybody was involved in kind of focused on rebuilding and then kind of reinforcing, strengthening the momentum that was actually created after the fall of Taliban. And that was, I think, a great opportunity, and that's how they rebuilt the Afghan National Army, and also they increased their capabilities in terms of infrastructure and also whatever they needed. That gives them a little bit of time to actually focus on that before the resurgency started, actually, and the Taliban started launching their serious attacks. And I think it was maybe around 2006 and 7 that, we started seeing these activities on the Taliban's part.
I was going to have you jump back in time a little bit. So you were born, around 1980 then, if my math is good?
I was born 1977.
1977, okay. And so, tougher memories here, but can you tell our listeners what it was like living in the 1970s, then going through the 80s, and then maybe talk a little bit about what it was like when the Taliban came into Afghanistan, as you saw. You saw some big shifts. I know you were young when the Soviet invasion happened, but you did get to see the Civil War and the Taliban as somebody with clear memories of it. I think our audience should be reminded a little bit about what that was like for y'all.
Mm-hmm. Sure, yeah. So when I was born, President Muhammad Dawood, the first president of Afghanistan, was still in power. He actually took power in 1973 from his cousin, who was the King Zahir Shah and the last king of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He kind of, it was a sort of peaceful coup d'etat, I would rather call it. So it was just a sort of agreement between the king and his cousin that, now, because before that, already these, the democracy was kind of getting roots in Afghanistan. And I think it started at the early 60s. And then political parties were forming, and then people started talking about democracy, freedom, and things like that. So then they had this agreement, like, really just go ahead and leave the power in, and I'll continue in the form of presidency. So he actually declared himself as the first president of Afghanistan. He was still in power, but unfortunately, he was, in some respects, he was very wise, and also I would say, kind of having a vision about Afghanistan. But unfortunately, what happened? He was between these two superpowers, being United States and Russia back then. And then they have this military contract actually signed between the Russia and Afghanistan. So they started sending troops for training to Russia. But he has a famous quote. He said that people actually warned him back then that it's kind of dangerous and it's kind of playing with the fire. But he was saying that I know currently I am actually lighting my American cigarette with the Russian matches. So that was his famous quote about those years. It makes sense, but he kind of inadvertently started growing these nests of I would say communist Marxists within his government, and then kind of let them do whatever they want to do. And finally, what happened in that,
full invasion. If you open the door a little bit for the Soviet Union, they'll kick it all the way open, and they did. So flash forward a little bit to your memories as the Soviets are starting to leave Afghanistan. What was the civil war like for you when the Mujahideen couldn't figure out how to govern the country?
Well, I mean that before that, I would like to start with this kind of I would like to preface this with some thoughts that we actually have about this.
Oh, sure.
So there's this idea of national narrative, and actually that's everybody's story. That what happens to them throughout their life and their homeland, and then kind of it was developed by CIA, obviously, as a powerful tool to look at the kind of study people. But I mean that a part of that is looking into all these seminal events and what happens to the people. Actually, I have experienced this personally. And that is that, when you go through all these seminal events, imagine that you wake up in the morning. Actually, a friend of mine, he actually talked about this to me, and that really makes sense a lot now when I look back in my life. When you wake up in the morning, that, the world is not as you see, as you are. And what happens? Everything changes. Your attitudes, your priorities, and everything changes. So it was the same thing. Back then, people went through so many of these seminal events as it being a foundational moment, a turning point, and whatever happens during the history, that they wake up in the morning, everything is changed. There is new system in place, new people you see on the street every morning, like now your priorities change, your attitude changes, and you're just trying to basically find a way to survive, right? And that's the mentality when those seminal events happen. So the same thing happened to the people, and it was not just the Mujahideen that took over after Russian troops left. And I mean that in 1992, that was the last Marxist president in power, Dr. Najibullah. But before that, people have already experienced all these seminal events, including that coup d'etat that led to the Marxists coming to power, and after that, Russians invaded, and then after that, Mujahideen took power. So they were already kind of used to it.
Multiple shocks.
Yes, they were trying to prepare for it, and with that survivability mentality, you know, you're already ready for that change, the big change that is coming. And, you know, now, what are your priorities? What are your attitudes? And you have to be ready for that. So basically what happened, the same thing. In the beginning, people will look at the Mujahideen as freedom fighters, and they took over the power, and they ousted Dr. Najibullah, and you know, Mujahideen. The first troops, the first fighters entered the city were actually the Ahmad Shah Massoud's fighters. That they entered the city, and then you know, there was this Mr. Hikmatyar, who was also his rival, and he was the leader of the Islamic Party, or Hizb Islami.
Yeah.
And he was, you know, they were in this rivalry for a long time, and Mr. Hikmatyar wanted to be the first person who enters the city. Well, actually, it didn't happen, and then they ended up, you know, just starting another fight against each other. So that was the beginning of the civil war, and all these parties that, well, back then we had like 7 parties. They called them Pakistan-based parties. Those were kind of Sunni Muslim parties, and then we had 8 of them, you know, kind of Iran-based parties. They call them, and those were Shia parties. So they all got in fight once, you know, after Dr. Najibullah was ousted. So that was a chaos, a real chaos, and.
Were you in school at the time when that was going on?
Yes, I was in high school at the time, and I remember that, you know, in the morning we woke up at, you know, city is full of the, it's already occupied by the Mujahideen. You know, you don't see those orderly soldiers that used to see there, and that was those fighters and with their, you know, pakol hats and all these things. It was crazy. I mean, everything changed, and the schools were off for a couple of days, and then the school started, and it wasn't like this. I mean, those were chaotic years for a long time, and then again, the house-to-house fight started, and actually, the city was divided into so many different you know, entrenchments and so many different strongholds for so many different factions. You could not basically go maybe 10 kilometers out of, you know, where you lived, because you would see different people, and then you would be in trouble. So that was really bad, very bad situation.
So and a lot of divided at city blocks. I mean, that's a stunning thing if you're a kid trying to get to school and you've got to pass through checkpoints of 7 different rival, you know, warlord gangs at this point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean that, you know, for me, because my high school actually was located in the center of city, and we were kind of living in the north part of the city. So for me to get to my high school, I had to take at least 2 buses, and then there was no transportation available. Everybody was walking, and you have to walk. It was like, I would say, around 6 miles, and every day we had to walk that 6 miles to get to school. But it wasn't not that, and that 6 mile would look like maybe 1,000 miles if you imagine all these dangers and risks along the way. Like, the city was constantly bombarded by Hikmatyar's forces, and you know, they were just, you know, bombarding city with all these missiles and all kinds of, you know, mortars, things like that, and cannons, and along the way, I would say that there were times, like, you know, maybe in this 5 or 6 miles, we had to hit the ground 10 or 20 times, because everybody, you see that you're trying to save yourself from all these shrapnels that are coming to you. So that was that bad.
Y'all are walking to high school and having to learn to be infantrymen and you know, react to fire all throughout the day. I mean, our kids in America now are complaining if they have to, you know, walk a half a mile to school. But I mean, I just don't think people can imagine that. 6 miles of hoping you don't get hit by a rifle, a rocket, or a mortar. It's a stunning thing to live through.
Exactly. And then it wasn't just that. And when you get to school and you're in the classroom, and our teachers were constantly moving us from one class to another class because we were, getting shelled by these, Hikmatyar, launching these missiles and all these fighting groups. And it was very bad. So anyways, I finished high school like this, and after that, Mr. Rabbani actually took the power as the second president of the Mujahideen government. In fact, they started, all these Mujahideen fighters started forming coalitions, very fragile coalitions, temporarily, like, Hikmatyar made a coalition with General Dostum, the powerful Uzbek leader, and also with one of the Hazaras leaders. And the same way, Massoud was in the city with his forces, and he was back then the Minister of Defense, but Rabbani, who is also his party leader, was his party leader. And then he was the president of Afghanistan. So then we had the other parties creating coalitions all over the country. So they were fighting constantly, and these fragile coalitions, will fall apart, and then they will start making another coalition against each other. And this chaotic situation actually lasted up until 1995, if I'm not mistaken. And then actually this Taliban movement started. In the beginning, people were looking at Taliban movement as their saviors. And they thought that, they would come and conquer the city, and then they kicked all these fighting groups out of the country, and, well, there will be a everlasting peace, everybody will live happily ever after. But it didn't happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, it all sounded good. You hear that tale a lot in different cities and villages that, man, if we could get rid of all the warlord and the infighting of these Mujahideen leftovers, and this Taliban looks like a great promise, and then it didn't happen.
That is where we will stop with Khalil for today, but be sure to check out our next episode airing in 2 weeks. Khalil talks about the exact moment he realized the Taliban were not the saviors he and the city thought they were, and how he escaped their demands to join their fight. Thanks for listening to We're Just Talking About It. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at We're Just Talking About It, and you can email us at wjtanc@gmail.com.